Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to do a beer that's half Scottish, half South African, so it should be really quite interesting. And this one comes to you from two breweries who I've been doing quite a few beers from recently actually, and I'm quite interested to see what they can produce when you put them together. So for the Scottish side of things, we're going to head back up towards Dyce in Aberdeen, and that of course is home to Fierce Beer, and the South African side is Devil's Peak Brewing Company from Cape Town in South Africa. And this beer, I guess you could say, is the kind of bigger brother of one of Fierce Beer's kind of, their core range, I guess, if you like, one of their kind of heavy hitters. So for this one, we're going to have a taste of the Imperial Cafe Racer. This guy is an Imperial Porter coming in at 8.5%. The original Cafe Racer, of course, is a coffee vanilla porter. This particular version has been brewed with Kenyan coffee and Madagascan vanilla. So it should be a really interesting one. I've enjoyed the beers that I've had from Devil's Peak Brewing Company. I was quite lucky to be able to get some of those actually, because South African beer is a little bit like gold dust, but Fierce Beer are really making a good name for themselves. Probably one of the best known Scottish craft breweries at the moment, and they seem to be exporting more and more. So if you get the chance to try some Fierce Beers, they're one of the best breweries at the moment that you're going to find from Scotland. And personally, I really rate them when it comes to their darker beers, but I do need to try a few more of their IPAs and things like that. And Devil's Peak Brewing Company are one of the kind of premier craft breweries when it comes to South African beer. But both really good breweries, and I'm certainly looking forward to see what these guys can do when they get together. So we'll see how we get on with this one, and as always, I hope you guys enjoy my take on this beer. So anyway, as is usual with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the breweries involved here. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery websites, the link to my other reviews that I've done, both from Fierce Beer and from Devil's Peak Brewing Company. No doubt I will add some more to those in the fairly near future. There's all the usual social media. If you want to see more beer reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for both the Scottish beers that I've reviewed for you and the South African ones. Hopefully I can add more to the South African one fairly soon, but the Scottish one is constantly being added to. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Fierce Beer then. So as I've told you before, Fierce Beer are based in Dyce in Aberdeen, and they began life as the homebrewing experiments of David Grant, who'd worked for many years in the oil industry. So he'd been homebrewing since March of 2013, and after hosting a beer and food pairing dinner in May 2015 at his house, his beer received really kind of rave reviews, and this was what kind of prompted him to go in and kind of turn professional. So David's joined at the brewery by Dave McGarry, who also worked in the oil industry, but he used his redundancy package to put himself on a brewing course at Brew Lab in Sunderland in the northeast of England. So in April 2016 they moved into their brewery in the Kirkhill Industrial Estate in Dyce, just to the northwest of Aberdeen, quite close to Aberdeen Airport, and at the moment they can brew around 800,000 litres of beer per year. They started canning their beers early in 2018, and they now have their own bar on Ship Row in Aberdeen, which is called the Fierce Bar. This was where I bought this beer. The guy in there told me this was a limited edition beer and you wouldn't find it too much more, so I had to get myself one of these. But they actually want to move their brewery to a more central location in the city so that they can have a kind of bigger brewery and also a kind of restaurant and things like that there as well. So hopefully that doesn't take them too long to do that. There are a few locations where they might be able to do it, but property prices in Aberdeen are very, very expensive because of the oil industry and stuff like that. But it's a really nice city. I studied my masters in chemistry there, which was it was a really nice kind of 5 years doing that, and it's a very, very good craft beer city. That of course was where Brewdog started out. Down to the south in Stonehaven you've got 6 Degrees North as well, and now you've got these guys who in a lot of ways are filling the hole that was left by Brewdog since they've kind of gone corporate and things like that. But as I say, Fierce Beer produced some really nice stuff. I need to try a few more of their IPAs, but they seem to have a real knack for doing the kind of sour beers at the moment. They're playing around a lot with that, but their dark beers I've found tend to be really quite good. So hopefully I can try a few more of their kind of straight up IPAs and things like that. But in terms of things like Peanut Riot, Cafe Racer and things, you can't really really go wrong. They seem to have got a really a good knack when it comes to stouts and porters and stuff like this, but a very, very solid brewery all around, and one that you definitely want to check out if you're interested in Scottish beer. So that's all you need to know about them. The Facebook link and the website's in the description below. So let's move on to Devil's Peak Brewing Company, onto the South African side of things. So Devil's Peak Brewing was founded by Greg Crum in 2012, and he'd travelled the world sampling beers and also dabbled a little bit in home brewing as well. But he and his wife were avid climbers, and they used to home brew and share their beers with farmers and climbers, and they were eventually asked to brew a beer for a charity event that was being held by Rocklands. And while they were doing this, they decided to have their beer under the name Redcliffe Brewing Company, and at this event the beers went down really, really well. So after this, his friend Wolfgang from Paulaner actually introduced him to a group of people, one of whom was Russell Boltman, and these guys wanted to develop beer for their contract brewing project, which later evolved into the Black Crow Brewing Company. And one of the partners was Christian Andersen of Beerwerk, but also of Beer Here in Denmark, although he later pulled out and returned to Denmark quite soon after, actually. And it was during this time that the Devil's Peak brewing name was actually adopted, and this of course comes from the mountain that looks over Cape Town. But Greg and Russell set off on the Nano Brewery route, and they were joined later by Dan Badenhorst, and they started up in the Somerset West area of Cape Town, and they were later joined by Derek Szabo as well. In April of 2012, though, Greg left Devil's Peak to return to the US with his family, and JC Stein was actually hired to train as a brewer, and he had come from the wine industry. South Africa, of course, is really, really famed for its wines and things like that, but he had some home brewing experience as well, and he is now the head brewer of the company. But the brewery relocated in 2013 to Salt River, and they're now based at a 6,500 square metre facility with a tap room in Epping. But they also run a few different restaurants too, and they've also been introducing barrel aging to the craft beer scene in South Africa. But pretty much Devil's Peak Brewing Company are sort of the big name when it comes to craft beer in South Africa. They're really the first one who've actually made it to Europe and things like that. I think they're actually planning to open up their own brewery somewhere in the UK so they can get their beers throughout Europe. But it is cool to see a South African company actually coming across here, and hopefully when they're doing that they start to import a lot of the other South African craft beers as well, because from what I understand the South Africans are kind of experimenting a little bit with different hops and things like that as well. There are quite a few of these high alpha acid fruity hops being produced in South Africa now, and it does tend to be the thing that when a country does wine really well, they tend to produce beer quite well as well. I mean, I've seen that with Greece, Italy, Spain, Portugal's producing some really nice stuff as well, so I'm sure South Africa will kind of follow in that light at some point. But a really, really nice beer. I've enjoyed the IPAs that I've had from these guys, so it will be interesting to see what kind of contribution they've made to the porter on this one. I do have a few stouts and porters and things to review at some point from Devil's Peak as well, but it's, as I say, a really good brewery, this one. I've had good experiences with them in the past, and it's cool to see South African beer finally making it to Europe and getting out there a little bit, and hopefully that's you know, there's more to come from that. But that's all you need to know about Devil's Peak Brewing. Check out the brewery website in the description below, and the Facebook page is in there as well. So let's get on to the actual tasting of this beer itself. As I say, check out all the links in the video description below. But there you can see this one's using pretty much the Fierce Beer artwork. Really nicely presented beer, this. I do like that. I always find that these quite funny. Obviously that's a shark kind of, you know, wanting to pick up its food and things like that, but they always manage to get it so that it just looks kind of mad and quite funny. But I do like these kind of newspaper clipping styles of artwork that that Fierce Beer always managed to pull off. As I say, they started canning their beers back in early 2018. There you can see the Fierce Beer symbol on this one, the kind of almost like pumpkin head type hop flower with this one. It says on the side here, when you take a multi-award winning beer like Cafe Racer, amping it up and making sure it keeps the same level of awesomeness is critical. The use of Sumatran espresso and Madagascan vanilla guarantees that this velvet monster delivers on all fronts and to all people. So yeah, should be a really interesting one. The Sumatra, I'm just trying to think, maybe, I don't know if this is maybe a little bit different from the original, because it did say on Untappd that the original one used Kenyan coffee, but I thought Sumatra was, you know, somewhere down by like Indonesia or something like that. But I might be getting, you know, my geography might be a little bit off there. Sumatra, I was sure, was somewhere in the kind of Indonesia, Malaysia sort of area, but I don't know. I don't know, we'll see. But it should be a really nice beer anyway. It tells you a little bit about fierce on the side, tells you all the stuff. This one obviously is intended for export to Scandinavia as well. You can see the pant on it for the recycling. But yeah, 330ml can, 8.5% Imperial porter. So without further ado, let's get this one open. What I should say about this beer, incidentally, is that it doesn't actually have the Devil's Peak symbol on it, which I'm not sure why it doesn't have that on it, because it did start out life as a collaboration beer. It was originally released in bottle, from what I understand, but the canned release, I think, must have just been fairly recent. So maybe that's the difference. Maybe the original one had Kenyan coffee, but as I say, Sumatra, there might be a region in Kenya that's called Sumatra as well. I don't quite know. But yeah, as you can see, it's poured pretty much as you would expect from an Imperial Porter. Nice, dark, ebony rosewood colour. There's a solid half finger, I would say, of a frothy beige tan head on this one. One or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, not that many of them actually, and then a few little ones just heading up towards the bottom of that head there. But overall, you know, it looks pretty much as you would expect from an Imperial Porter. If I shine this in front of the light, it's just got a little bit of that almost kind of Coca-Cola type thing to it, just on the edge. It's got a little bit of that kind of lighter chestnut quality. But I think, in fairness, the best way to describe the colour of this beer is a nice sort of dark ebony note. But yeah, let's take a closer look at the aroma and just see how we get on with this one. Ooh, right. The coffee on this one is really, really interesting. It really is. And I think I remember saying the same about the Cafe Racer as well, that the coffee had this quite aromatic note to it, and for me, the coffee in this one's even more aromatic than that. It's almost like a little bit citrusy or something. And by no means am I an expert when it comes to coffee. I very, very rarely drink coffee right enough. But you know, I could smell it and tell you, is that a good coffee or is it a bad coffee? That's about as far as it goes. But to me, the coffee in this one, it does smell really quite aromatic and things. And it is almost a little bit citrusy. It's almost got a little touch of an earthy quality to it, but it is more aromatic than anything else, I would say. But on top of that, you can smell some of the chocolate in this beer. And I'd say it's quite a high cocoa chocolate actually, but at the same time, it does have a little bit of a kind of milkiness to it. There is a little touch of that lighter kind of milky quality to the beer. But yeah, some sweeter chocolate in there. You can pick up a little bit of brown sugar, but I think the strength of the coffee notes in this one are really pushing that back. The vanilla is coming out too, and maybe that's what's given the chocolate a sort of milky kind of quality, if you like. But the vanilla comes across as really quite sweet actually. The vanilla comes across really, really nicely in this one. And Madagascan vanilla is actually quite distinctive. It's I don't really know how to describe exactly, but it's almost just like it's smoother and a little bit more ice cream like, if that makes sense. But you can really pick up that vanilla note at the front end of the beer. You have to take the beer in, the aroma in a little bit more deeply to really pick out the the kind of the vanilla, the coffee notes to this one. If you really want that, take it in a little bit more deeply. But if you just take a little bit of a kind of lighter whiff of it like that, that's when you really start to get the vanilla notes out of it. There's maybe a little touch of earthy hop in there, but the hops are really kind of suppressed by the coffee. The coffee is the thing that's really dominating the aroma with this beer. And there's a little touch as well, I would say, of a kind of slightly red candied fruit. But overall, it smells like a really, really nice beer, this one. I do like how everything goes together in this beer. But yeah, just take a little bit of time and enjoy the aroma of this one before you get stuck in. The Cafe Racer itself had a really good aroma. This one is kind of a little bit amped up, but a little bit more leaning towards the coffee side of things. But let's see how we get on with this one then. So this one is the Imperial Cafe Racer, a collaboration beer between Fierce Beer from Dyce in Aberdeen and Devil's Peak Brewing Company from Cape Town in South Africa. Let's get stuck into this one. Slàinte, skål. Ooh. Yeah. Now, I see what they're saying when they talk on the can about this one, is that it's quite a hard job to take a beer that is as successful as Cafe Racer is, and amp it up a little bit. But just on that first wee sip, you can see they've been successful with it. I'll tell you that right away with it. It is really nice, this one. Yeah, that's a really solid beer. Where to start with it? The coffee in this one for me is a little bit smoother than the original Cafe Racer. It's the whole beer. Maybe it's just the booziness of the beer, right enough, but the way that everything goes together in this beer is just really, really nice. Actually, it's just a beautiful beer. You can tell within a few sips that this is going to be a cracker. This one's definitely a nice sort of sipper, if you like. So if you manage to get a hold of one of these, really savour it, honestly. Yeah. So with this one then, the malt base it's pretty straight up, if you like. I mean, with this beer, you can feel there is a little touch of a bready quality to this one. You can pick up that there's a little bit of an almost pale malty, just a light kind of quality that just kind of blankets in the middle of your palate in this one. It's almost a little bit creamy as well. It really has a nice sort of creamy quality to it, but there is a little bit of an almost wheaty sort of bready base to this beer, and some I think there's a little bit of an oaty smoothness to this one as well, and the vanilla's really kind of mixing in with that, which is nice. The vanilla, and I think I said the same about the Cafe Racer as well, the vanilla really infused into that sort of slightly bready base that the beer had, and as you kind of sit on top of that, that's where the nice kind of coffee smoothness is coming out. It does, the coffee in this one for me, it is quite aromatic. Yeah, the beer, it's interesting because when you take the beer in, it's the wheaty and the oaty bits that come out first, and then the coffee just sort of flips over your tongue from the front of the palate. You can just feel it wash the top of your palate there, and it's really interesting because you just get a little bit, there is a little touch of an earthiness to the coffee, and I think it is mainly kind of aromatic, and that aromaticity kind of carries on a little bit into the aftertaste of the beer. There's a wee bit of chocolate in this one, and I would say it leans a little bit, it has got a mixture of a sort of slightly higher cocoa thing, but it's also got a mixture of that kind of milkier chocolate as well. Maybe it's the vanilla that's kind of given the impression of that, actually, and the vanilla is maybe making the chocolate taste as if it's a little bit more milky than anything else. There's maybe a little touch of a kind of brown sugary note to this beer, but I think it is more bready and oaty, and then it's got the kind of coffee beans just sitting on top of it, actually, which is nice. Everything in this beer goes together really, really well. This one's definitely one that's all about how the flavours kind of blend together. It's a coffee vanilla porter, right enough, but everything kind of has its place, and nothing tries to kind of dominate the beer, if you like. And as I said, in the aroma, it was the coffee that was dominating it, but it's a lot more balanced, if you like, in the actual flavour, which is good. Yeah, I would say this beer, as your palate adjusts to it more and more, it does start to get a little bit sweeter. I think that the vanilla flavours really start to come out more and more as your palate adjusts to this one, but the coffee starts to push its way back out a little bit more as you kind of progress further into the aftertaste for this one. As I say, I think the coffee's got just a little bit of a florally or very slightly citrusy quality to it, actually, and it's got a little bit of a roasted note to it as well, which is very nice. But the malt base is really balanced. I don't know if it's right to call the coffee flavours the malt base, because really they're adding the coffee to the beer, but the malty side of the beer in the centre of your palate, it's got the slightly roasty coffee notes, but it's very well balanced by the vanilla and the sweetness of the malts as well. It's just a really nice combination of flavours. That in terms of the hoppy side of the beer then, Back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness there. By no means is this beer going to blow your head off in terms of IBUs. It's really not that high in terms of IBUs. I'd guess maybe around the sort of 40 mark, 50 at a push. But nice little bit of earthiness in the back corners of the palate. That spreads to the along the sides of the tongue there, just to be a little bit smoother. There's maybe a little touch of a floral note on the front corners of your palate, and then around the very front curve of the tongue, it's just a little bit lighter and grassy, I would say. And then when you go behind the front curve of the palate, that's where you get that little oily bubble, where those nice fruity esters start to come out of the beer. And for me, this one again is very simple. It's just got a little touch of an almost, it's maybe a little bit, a very light sort of figgy flavour. I always find figs have just got this very light, almost candied fruit flavour to them. There's maybe a little touch of that kind of little heart-shaped sweet that I always talk about in the Haribo Star Mix. It has a little touch of that kind of candied strawberry note to it. But the fruits in this one aren't too prominent, I would say. Definitely not. But yeah, I always find you just get a little touch of a red fruity note to the beer in the beginning. That's just the way the hops and the malt kind of mix together. But overall, you know, this is a really really solid beer, this one. It's you can definitely tell compared to the original Cafe Racer, it's a little bit more boozy, and the main thing that gives it away is that the fact that the coffee flavours are just a little bit stronger, if that makes sense. But you've also got it's not unbalanced, if you like. Usually you need the malt base to cover up the booziness, if you like. But in terms of 8.5%, this beer really covers its alcohol pretty well. You could easily take that up, I would think, to around 10 or 11%. And you would still be able to cover the alcohol with this one. It's very, very smooth, and I guess at 8.5% it maybe is at the lower end of what you can do with an Imperial Porter, but the alcohol content doesn't matter. It's more about the flavour, and this beer, everything blends together very, very well. It's a cracking beer, and one you really need to try this for yourself. In terms of the mouthfeel then, let's see. It's somewhere, it's kind of at the top end of mid-bodied, but at the bottom end of full-bodied. It's somewhere in that kind of region. Carbonation's very smooth to this one. It's got quite a nice oily mouthfeel to it, this beer. The malt base, as I say, has a good balance between the kind of roasty notes from the coffee and the sweeter notes from the likes of the vanilla and all of that kind of thing. There's a nice bit of there's a little bit of bitterness from the hops, but it does smooth out a little bit. As I say, I reckon around 40 IBUs, and there's a little touch of a juicy fruit to this one. But overall, it really is a cracking beer. The Cafe Racer probably is one of the best porters, if not the best porter, that you're going to find in Scotland these days, and this one does kind of top it. It's a bit of a shame that this is a limited edition, if you like, or I don't know if they'll make it a seasonal or something like that, but it's a really top quality beer, and one that I definitely recommend that you check out. If they have changed the coffee in this, it would be interesting to try the original. Like I say, it was Kenyan coffee in the original, Sumatran espresso in this one, so I'm not too well versed in terms of coffee. As I say, I think Sumatra, I've got a feeling that Sumatra's a region of Indonesia or something like that. I'm not certain on that, but overall, the main thing that's important is whether the beer's good, and this one certainly is good. If you get the chance to try this, I highly recommend that you do. So we'll leave it at that for this one. So this was the Imperial Cafe Racer, a collaboration beer between Fierce Beer from Dyce in Aberdeen, who are really doing some good stuff. Like I say, they've got a pretty good knack when it comes to dark beer these days, and Devil's Peak Brewing Company, who are the first brewery from South Africa really to make it to Europe, and they do some nice stuff as well. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this one in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are, both from Fierce Beer and from Devil's Peak as well. Thank you again for watching. Make sure you check out my social media, and I will catch you guys very soon. Have a go at this beer if you get the chance. The original Cafe Racer is an absolute cracker as well, and if you get the chance to try some Devil's Peak beers, do have a go at those for yourself. Until the next time, Slanger just now, and I will catch you guys very soon. Cheers.